The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific, yeah! It's Cartoonerific, Cartoonerific, it's Cartoonerific, with your host Brian Mitchell.
Well, welcome to the Cartoonerific podcast, classic animated cartoons. I am Brian Mitchell, and as always, I am your host. Well, we've been telling you about this for weeks, and it's finally happening. In April, Google Podcasts will be no more. It's fizzling. It's going by way of the dodo bird. It is out of here. And if you had a subscription for the Cartoonerific podcast on Google, well, you're not going to be notified anymore because they're not carrying it. And there is not going to be a Google podcast anymore. So you're going to have to find another service if you want to continue listening to us. And, we are available on Apple and Spotify. There's a lot of other services that carry us. If you don't want to subscribe to any of those services, you could always go to our Facebook page, and we always let you know when a new Cartoonerific podcast is uploaded, and there's always a link there, so you can click on that, and we'll take you right to it. So that's an option. We are waiting to get onto YouTube Music, and we have applied, and we've been pre-approved, and we're just waiting for the opportunity to actually upload these podcasts. So we're waiting for that. So until you hear from us that it is definitely on YouTube Music, try to access it from another service. Try to subscribe to another service. So this way you're always notified every time a Cartoonerific podcast is uploaded for your listening pleasure. Okay, there, I've said it. It's surprising to me how much stuff has fallen into the public domain. And recently we reported on Steamboat Willie being available in the public domain. It hit 95 years. I think that's the limit, and it just falls into public domain. But there are a lot of other things that have fallen into public domain. There's been features and cartoons and newsreel, all these different things that have fallen into public domain, not because it hit 95 years, but because somebody wasn't doing the due diligence at some of these studios or the people that hold the rights to these films, because they have to be periodically, they got to be renewed, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, 20 years. So somebody has to kind of keep track of that and make sure they're renewing the film to make sure that it has the copyright protection. Well, there's been just about every studio has lost one or two or maybe even more of these cartoons have fallen into the public domain. And that's a good thing for us, but it's almost like flushing money down a toilet bowl, for crying out loud. Could you imagine that? I go crazy if I lose $20, or $10. But these films have to be worth, $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. They're priceless, So once you lose it, it's basically can't really use it. So that's shame on some of the studios and some of the people that work there that do not or have lost their copyright protection. But like I said, it's good for us. So if you're a businessman or a businesswoman out there and you know of these public domain films, you can actually take it and market them. You can take those films and put them onto DVD or Blu-ray, and nobody can come after you for it. You just put it out there, and you can reap the rewards. You can make money off of it, which is pretty cool. So it kind of gives an enterprising person an opportunity to do things. And of course, we'll be taking advantage of that too, because we're we're going to have a Cartoonerific channel, which will have cartoons on it, some of our own, and of course, some of these public domain things as well, and other things too. So it should be kind of fun when we do that. But there are people taking advantage of that now, which is good. And they're finding creative ways of presenting these films. And I just happened to see one thing that I thought was actually kind of fun. And it is, well, let's just say this. What do you get when you take a stand-up comedian who's also a dad and combine it with public domain cartoons? Well, this is what you get. You get DADTOONS. DADTOONS, that's one word, DADTOONS. And it's an interesting way of presenting cartoons. And it's basically this guy sits down in a chair and he pulls out a beer, pops the cork or the cap on it, and tells you a little bit of history about it, and then goes into that particular cartoon. Almost like a Masterpiece Theater. Remember that? Masterpiece Theater, where they would present cartoons in a very highbrow way. And then basically it would be, through the mirror or clock cleaners or something like that. This is kind of the opposite. It's a regular dad presenting cartoons from his easy chair with a bottle of beer. And I thought it was kind of fun. And I figured we'd have this gentleman on the show. He is a stand-up comedian. His name is Braden Greenawalt. And he's coming up next on the Cartoonerific podcast. Don't go away.
You're listening to the Cartoonerific podcast, classic animated cartoons with your host animator, Brian Mitchell. And now it's time for our special Cartoonerific guest.
We've had many different types of guests on this show, and I'd like to mix it up a little bit because we'll have on authors and we'll have on cartoonists and animators and creators, writers, whatever. We have a whole mix of different people. And we've had on from time to time people that have YouTube channels where they're talking about cartoons or they're presenting cartoons. Well, this was kind of an interesting thing to me. This is basically a guy who is a stand-up comedian and a dad. And he comes in, he's just doing stuff around the house. And then he sits down in an easy chair and he presents his favorite cartoon, saying basically, your kid should be watching this stuff. But there is never, ever a kid with him, maybe off screen or whatever. Might be a cat or dog there. To me, it's funny. But anyway, that's how he's presenting it. And I'm actually glad to have him on today to talk about this YouTube channel where he presents all these public domain cartoons. They actually the ones he's presented have looked really, really good. But the show is called DADTOONS, and it's DADTOONS, all one word. And it's presented by stand-up comedian Mr. Braden Greenawalt. Braden, thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. So tell me a little bit about your background. You grew up on cartoons like everybody else, right?
For sure. Yeah. When I was a kid, I was, so I'm 33, so I'm a child of the 90s.
Okay.
So a lot of people my age were set in front of the TV with VHSs of public domain cartoons running continuously. I remember it very well. I had a VHS called 3 Hours of Cartoons.
Okay.
And that's 3 whole hours that your mom can put it on the VCR and just leave you sit. And I was engrossed. That was, I loved that stuff. Like, it was a lot of Superman, Betty Boop, a lot of Fleischer Studios kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it stuck with me. And I've been watching that stuff like my whole life.
What's your favorite cartoons off of that 3 hour thing? I mean, you said the Betty Boops and the Fleischer stuff. I'm sure they had some Warner Brothers stuff too. And
yep, they had some Warner Brothers, some Bugs Bunny. In fact, the first episode of DADTOONS is The Wabbit Who Came to Supper, which is like my favorite cartoon.
Wow. That's great.
That's like my favorite one. It's just really funny. It's like hilarious.
Well, yeah. No, well, all those Looney Tunes are pretty well done. I think after Tex Avery and Bob Clampett started doing their thing, everybody started catching up, and they produced some real fun cartoons from 1940 on.
But there was also a handful of Superman cartoons on there.
Right.
Which, like, that's how I knew about Superman for the longest time. That's, like, the only exposure to Superman I had.
The Fleischer Superman cartoons. All
yeah,
right.
the Fleischer Superman.
Yeah, they're great. They're great.
I remember when I learned that they were made in, like, the 40s, and it blowing my mind a little bit, because they're so gorgeous. They're better looking than most any cartoons since then, or a lot of cartoons since then.
Yeah, I think the history in those cartoons was the Fleischers were approached by Paramount Pictures, and they said, we want the Superman series, and the Fleischers didn't want to do it because it was so out of their league, and they gave them some outrageous price to do it, and Paramount actually agreed to do it, and that's why they exist, and they did them really well. A lot of fans of those things out there. Do you have any of the sets on public domain? I mean, from the public domain that have been put out of the Superman series, or
not of the Superman series in particular, but I have a fair collection of public domain DVDs.
Right.
I don't have that VHS tape anymore. I'd like to maybe find it again.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody puts it out. I'm thinking Thunderbeam might put it out or something. I don't know. Okay, so tell us a little bit about DADTOONS. You came up with this idea. How did you come up with this idea?
So, yeah, like I said, I used to watch cartoons all the time when I was a kid, and when I would get sick, this VHS of public domain cartoons was like what I would watch when I was sick. Mm-hmm. So I got COVID about 6 months ago.
Oh, wow.
And I put in my public domain DVD,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, just like when I was a kid, I was like transfixed. I was like, these cartoons are so good. Like, people need to be watching them. Like, people need to realize how, like, and they're free. Like, they belong to us. They're in the public domain. Like, so we have to take advantage of it. So while I had COVID, I called my friend and I'm like, hey, we should sell DVDs of public domain cartoons. Mm-hmm. And he's like, people don't buy DVDs like they used to.
Right.
He's like, it should be a YouTube show. And then it became a whole thing where I'm in character as a dad.
Right.
A dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of lecturing you about, you really should be watching these cartoons. These are important to our culture. Like, so I'm kind of lecturing the parents and also the kids, but it's light. It's fun. It's like, I'm in my man cave, like mm-hmm. sipping a beer. And there's always like an off-screen kid that I like yell at a little bit.
Right.
And the idea is to give people a reason to revisit these cartoons.
Right.
To like make it entertaining, and like I'm trying to be like the new like Captain Kangaroo. Like I'm trying to be like the cartoon host mm-hmm. for the 2020s.
Right.
That's my goal.
But you're directing it for more for the adults than the kids on this show.
It's kind of more for the kids, yeah, or more for the adults. Yes,
yeah,
it is kind of more for the adults,
right,
for sure.
So
yeah.
So what's your day job? What do you do during the day?
I sell advertising for the radio.
That's
I sell
cool.
Radio advertising.
Right. That's a tough job.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's really a lot of fun. You get to talk to all kinds of people. You get to be creative.
Right.
I've been doing it for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that I really like to do.
Is there any way to combine that cartoony, the love for the cartoons into the advertising, or?
Sure. I would like to have advertisements on my cartoon show. That would be awesome.
Well, I'm sure somewhere along the way that will happen. So let's dig down a little bit deeper. Like when you're coming up with ideas for these cartoons, you're showcasing like the best public domain cartoons. Has anything really surprised you? Has any cartoon in the public, like it's in the public domain and you can't believe it's in the public domain?
Yeah, there's a lot of Disney cartoons that are in the public. There's a lot of war propaganda cartoons are in the public domain because they were created for the government. So there's Donald Duck cartoons.
Yes.
There's Bugs Bunny. There's all kinds, and those are all coming. They're on the roster for future DADTOONS episodes.
I'm sure you're going to have to put some disclaimers on those things.
That is something I've been thinking, because we've been kind of avoiding like the cultural, because there's a lot of those cartoons. It was the 30s and 40s.
Right.
A lot of them have stuff that wouldn't fly today.
Sure.
So I've been kind of picking ones that don't have a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's definitely going to come a point in time where we're going to have to, where a dad is going to have that conversation that, hey, was cool back then. It wasn't really cool back then, but it's definitely not cool now.
They perceived it as cool back then because they're fighting an enemy, and but today it's not acceptable. So yeah, no, I would understand that. I'm putting a disclaimer, just saying, hey, look, this is a product of the times. We're just presenting it, whatever, you know.
And part of it is history. It's like our cultural history.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I really think is cool about these cartoons is that, like, when you think of the 30s and 40s, it's so long ago, it's hard to imagine what it was like for regular people back then. And the cartoons are like a glimpse into like what life was like what people cared about, what they thought was funny.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like really cool.
I think cartoons are a reflection of the times, you know, in an exaggerated way, but they definitely are expressing an opinion. How many of these shows have you done so far? The DADTOONS. So
we've done 6 episodes so far on YouTube.
Okay.
We have about another 6 in the can, ready to go.
So what are the cartoons that you have right now? So you said the Bugs Bunny one you have on there.
So The Wabbit Who Came to Supper is episode 1.
Okay.
Episode 2 is Steamboat Willie.
Oh, very neat.
Which just went in the public domain January 1st.
It just did. Mm-hmm.
Small Fry, Flesher Studios. Small Fry.
Mm-hmm.
Porky's Bear Facts, and old Looney Tunes.
Okay.
Superman, the first Superman.
Right.
And we just released the Leprechaun's Gold in anticipation of St. Patrick's Day.
Wow.
Which is a famous studios.
Yes. A lot of famous studios in public domain.
Yes, and Flesher. And a lot of them are really good.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of Terrytoons in public domain too. Have you ever seen any of those?
Yes. Yeah, those are. I've got a great big list of potential future episodes. Obviously, your suggestions will be taken very seriously.
Well, Terrytoons were not they were not the best cartoons, and but there are some good ones in there, and there's some interesting ones. So I know those are available. A lot of Fleshers, a lot of famous studios are in public domain. Talking before the podcast, Disney is a bunch that they don't want you to know about.
That's right.
And Warner Brothers. And I think MGM has a gaggle of cartoons that are available. So I'm sure you're identifying these things as you go on, you know.
And MGM one is upcoming in spring.
Mm-hmm.
Which was actually the directorial debut of Hanna. I'm forgetting his first name.
Bill Hanna. William Hanna.
William Hanna.
Yes.
Of Hanna-Barbera. So
right.
That one's coming up. That might be the next episode, actually, in spring.
Wow. That's kind of cool. Have you identified now? You know, when we think about public domain cartoons, we're thinking about things that were done in the 20s most of the time. Especially with Disney, because I think they really pushed that copyright thing. But it seems like every year, as the years go on, you're going to have a steady supply of things available. So it's actually you're in a very, very good position right now to get a lot of Disney cartoons over the next year and the year after or whatever.
That's right. So yeah, Steamboat Willie, we're really excited to have that one. I know there's a Mickey Mouse cartoon called The Mad Doctor.
Yes.
That is in the public domain.
Oh, wow.
It's a brilliant cartoon. And nobody ever talks about it. Just like you said, it's like Disney doesn't want anybody to know, I think, that it's in the public domain.
No.
It is.
No, they don't. I'm trying to think. There are, I know there's some educational cartoons from the 40s that they kind of let slip into the public domain. There's a lot of cartoons that were done for TV back in the 50s, and I would say the 60s that somehow they didn't renew the copyright and they just kind of fell into the public domain. Is there anything there that is of interest that you've identified?
Well, there's one example of that that I'm especially aware of, and it's the Three Stooges.
Yes.
The Three Stooges cartoon series. That was on my 3 hours of cartoon VHS tape.
Right. Yeah.
So those are to come. The Three Stooges. It's like a whole series that they did that, they just didn't think it was worthwhile to renew the copyright, I guess.
Right. I know there was some series that was done called The Piper, which it was a live action animation thing, and it was a guy who came out and he was dressed in a, I don't know, almost like a Robin Hood outfit, with the feather and his cap and stuff like that, and he'd come out. And he would tell a story, and the story would be in really limited animation. I have a feeling those hit public domain, but a lot of interesting material. Are you going to cover anything from like the Fleischers, the two features that they had, which was Gulliver's Travels and Mr. Bug Goes to Town? I believe they were both fell into public domain as well.
I think that Mr. Bug Goes to Town is not in the public domain.
Really?
Because I think Paramount hung on to it for according to my research.
Right.
But their Gulliver's Travels, yes. I have visions of like a series finale or a season finale where we do a movie,
right,
where we break in every 25 minutes with a little intermission,
right, or maybe a little commentary or something like that.
For sure,
that'd be really neat. That'd be really neat.
I'm kind of trying to replicate when I was a kid. We had this giant antenna on our TV. We lived in rural Pennsylvania,
right?
And we had this giant antenna on the roof of our house.
Where'd you live in Pennsylvania? Because so huge. It's a giant state, So
I lived in western Pennsylvania.
Okay,
about halfway between Pittsburgh and Erie.
Wow, it's a long way. It's a long way from New York, I'll tell you. I drove it. I had to do a talk over there, probably about 20 years ago. No, 22 years ago, and it was the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. And it doesn't exist anymore, but anyway, they flew me out there, and it was right after 9/11, so security was really tight. But I took this 36-seater to Pittsburgh, and it was interesting. It was really interesting. First time I've been on a 36-seater. So, yeah, really feels like...
Right after 9/11. Sounds scary.
It was. Especially when I came back, because the President of the United States was in town, and basically, I'm on Long Island. I'm on Long Island, New York, doing this. And so anyway, the pilot comes on as soon as we take off, and he's like, we have a little bit of a problem. I'm like, oh, God, what is this? And he's like... they've cleared New York airspace. We can't fly through New York airspace, so we have to come around we have to go up to Boston and come around from the ocean. And
so that was right after 9/11.
It was like a month after.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so everything was still very tight. And I just remember trying, because of what had happened, I was trying to get out of doing this talk. So, but I couldn't get out of it. And I figured, okay, well, I'm sure security is going to be really tight. And it was. So, it worked out. But anyway, back to DADTOONS. So have you gotten any comments on this? I think it's fun. I think it's a whole lot of fun.
We love doing it. We're hoping to build the audience. We want people to get excited about cartoons.
Right.
And like I was saying, we had this antenna on our TV.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
And we had this antenna on our TV, and we could move it with a motor, so I could pick up.
Mm-hmm.
I could pick up channels from Erie,
right,
Pennsylvania, and I could pick up channels from Pittsburgh, but I could also get Cleveland,
right,
and then I could you turn it and you get all kinds of channels. And I was a night owl,
right.
So these public access shows that aired at 3:00 in the morning, they were just some dudes on a couch talking about movies. That's
right.
kind of the vibe I'm going for.
Right. Well, what I saw was pretty fun. Are you actually drinking beer on the show when you do it?
Yeah.
Yes. What's the favorite? What's the favorite beer? What's the go-to?
My favorite beer is Line and Google's Summer Shandy.
Yes. Yeah, I have a friend who really likes that. I'll polish off about 12 of those.
First episode, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's very neat. It's very neat. Do you theme the beer for each episode? So it's I don't know.
Yes, actually. Or we're trying to do that more. So our newest episode is The Leprechaun's Gold.
Right.
By Famous Studios.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm drinking a Guinness.
There you go. I figured you would go that way because I haven't seen that one. And that sounds fun. So, are you going to try to get crazier with these shows, or because the first one I saw, it was very light and it was humorous and a little goofy, and I really liked it. And I think if you continue to play that card, I think you're going in a really good direction. So,
the more we do, the kind of more ambitious that we are. So one of our newer ones was Superman, and in the script we were talking about the history. We were talking about Max Fleischer,
mm-hmm.
and my friend was like, "We should do a flashback. You should." So I dressed up like Max Fleischer, put on a little fake mustache, put on a tie.
Yeah.
And I got the phone call saying, "Hey, we want you to make Superman."
Right.
And then I make it rain with $50,000. So we're trying to do a little more of that, historical reenactments, maybe.
It's very interesting. No, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun.
It's a little inspired by Drunk History, the Comedy Central show.
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it. It can be very funny.
Yeah. So we're kind of what if we do real brief, 30-second historical reenactments where we dress up like cartoon magnates like Chuck Jones and that kind of stuff. We're excited to do that.
I think it's great. I think you're off and running. I think you have something. So when I saw it, I was like, yeah, definitely. We're going to have him on. We'll talk about cartoons. Are there? Okay, I know you have favorite public domain. Have you delved into, really delved into the history of this stuff? Are you a history buff as far as the animation goes, or is it just enough to, kind of get it there?
I'd say it's probably closer to the second thing. It's
mm-hmm.
It's an interest of mine, and I've delved deeply before, in the past, but I'm not an expert. But the more we do this, the more I am turning into one.
Of course. How could you not? Right. Is there? Okay, I know you of the public domain stuff. What was your favorite cartoons growing up? Because I'm sure you were able to see other cartoons other than the public domain stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
So The Simpsons was a big deal for me when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I loved The Simpsons.
Right.
It's my favorite show. It still is probably my favorite show.
Yeah.
I've got Simpsons comic books
on your wall. Now they're not going to see this on the podcast, but you.
That's right. That's
but
right. It's audio.
That's right.
Yeah, you'll see. I have Simpsons comic books hanging up on my wall.
That's right.
It's like I've been. The Simpsons has been super influential to me.
Right.
But also all the other stuff that kids my age liked, the Rugrats, Animaniacs,
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Right.
So I looked at your IMDb.
Oh boy.
You worked on Hysteria.
Very little.
I loved that show. I feel like that's a show that people forget about.
I think they do. I don't think it was as popular. And I don't, I don't have the ratings or, how that show did. I know Animaniacs and Tiny Toons did really well. Tasmania did well. Batman, of course. And all those people were, there was this unit of people working on Tiny Toons, and all of a sudden, Bruce Timm was working on Tiny Toons, and all of a sudden he's pulled away because he was working with Eric Radomski on the pilot for the Batman show because they had a vision for that. And, when we were done with Tiny Toons, we had, it was basically the same people just developing Animaniacs. So, we just all... Actually, we sat around for a couple of months until they decided what they were going to do. And then all of a sudden, we were just developing things, drawing things like crazy, and trying to come up with a concept for the show. So I think Hysteria was trying to satisfy, and I'm big on educational. I love educational cartoons, especially when they're done well. I love the Disney educationals. I love all the Bell Science System stuff, which I don't know if that's public domain, but that may be something you may want to take a look at because it's animation. The Bell Science System. I think Chuck Jones directed one. Disney directed. I'm not sure if Disney directed one. I think they were doing their own thing actually. But Seamus Culhane, I think Friz Freleng directed one. Walter Lantz, I think, did one. Woody Woodpecker fame and they're basically, it's a guy, they're talking about science. It's almost like it could have been Walt Disney there instead of this guy, but he's talking about the sun. And so it goes into animation. They were a lot of fun. I think they're about a half an hour or 40 minutes long.
Oh, that's cool.
They may be in public domain now. So just to kind of throw that to you, maybe check that out. Where were we?
Were we talking about Hysteria?
Hysteria. Sorry. Well, okay. So back to history. So I like that stuff, and I think that came from because I remember working on Animaniacs, and they're really pushing. Oh, you have to have some educational stuff in that show, and so I did the Yakko's World thing. Nations of the World. So I did that. And that was an attempt to be educational. And of course, a lot of those countries weren't even countries. San Juan is not a country. So, but it was in there because they needed to rhyme with Guam. So San Juan, And so all this stuff happened. And I learned a lot from doing it, because I had to research all the countries and find out what were real countries and not. Yeah. So, but they did that.
Wacko's World.
Yes.
So Wacko's World, you're right. It's like educational, but that's one of the main things people remember from Animaniacs. Like that's one of the big things.
Oh, I know.
So I know. It works. And Hysteria, I liked because it was like irreverent. Like it was a little bit rude.
Of course, yeah.
But it was educational, and I love that. I was like, you can be smart and funny at the same time.
Yeah. No, it was a good concept. Tom Ruegger was a good producer, and he had some really good ideas, and he knew funny, and so he was basically the showrunner on all that stuff. So I think they kept pushing for that educational angle, and they gave him Hysteria, but I think that was maybe the last of those shows that they did. And then it kind of just, I think it kind of, I don't want to say fell apart, but I think after that, I think there was, they had those bunch of shows, and then Batman went on, continued.
Sure.
But
so
Yeah.
that's always been what appealed to me about cartoons was the comedy. So I failed to mention I do stand-up comedy.
Oh, there you go. Cool.
That's another thing that I do.
Right.
Just here in Raleigh.
Well, that's important. That's important. That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's always kind of been my interest. I know some people that are into cartoons, they like the drawings, they like to draw,
Right.
and they like it because they like the artistry, which obviously that is an important part of it. For me, it's always been the humor, the jokes, like the writing. That's always been the thing that's been the most appealing to me about it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that I've liked most about it is the fact that you could do these wonderful drawings and make them appealing, and then in telling this this wild story. And some of them aren't really stories; they're just situations with a lot of gags in them. But the magic to me is being able to tell, to do that, and to make somebody laugh for 5 or 6 minutes. That's why I'm big on Bob Clampett and Chuck Jones, and Disney had some funny stuff too. MGM had some real funny stuff with Tex Avery and Bill and Joe, and even the stuff in the 60s and 70s, 80s. I mean, there are things. Sometimes I'm surprised by something that's so outrageous and so fun that's done today that I'll laugh. But it's been. I used to laugh at this stuff all the time, and then it's just like, you get used to the cartoons after a while, and you still appreciate them, but nothing's fresh and new. And then when you see something that is like that, even from an old cartoon, there was a cartoon that I saw, I think in New York City, and it was a Tex Avery cartoon. I had never seen it, and I couldn't believe that they killed the character off, and it was a Screwy Squirrel. Have you ever seen these cartoons?
I have not. No.
MGM did these 4 or 5 Screwy Squirrel cartoons, and the character is absolutely obnoxious. He's beating the living daylights out of characters that are pursuing him. And so the last one they did was a cartoon called Lonesome Lenny. And it's based off the Grapes of Wrath, and you have the dumb, mentally challenged guy in there, and he unknowingly or doesn't realize his own strength. He kills a character, and so Lonesome Lenny is basically a dog. And he's, he wants a friend, and Screwy Squirrel is supposed to be his friend in the cartoon. He's trying to get away from him. And finally, I think the last scene of the cartoon is he goes, I used to have a friend, but he don't move no more. And he pulls out Screwy, and he's just dangling there with
That's
he's
wonderful.
dead.
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, they literally killed off the character.
That's great. So, like, when I was talking with my friend about DADTOONS, he was like, how edgy should we be? Like, how far should we go, like, with our jokes? And I was like, we should be at least as edgy as the cartoons we're introducing.
Yeah.
Because they're edgier than people realize, like, a lot of them.
Oh, yeah. They're very brash. I mean, they were doing stuff back then that studios wouldn't do today. They wouldn't allow them to do it. The closest that we've had to that is like Roger Rabbit, and that was back in, was it the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s? It's closest we've gotten to that. And I mean, maybe Ren and Stimpy did some stuff too, But
and in the 30s and 40s, a lot of these cartoons that we're highlighting, they didn't have a child audience in mind when they were making them. Like, it wasn't for kids. It was for everybody.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's the way they kind of gauge them, because they would do a cartoon at Warner Brothers, and they didn't really screen the cartoon. They ran it for themselves. And they felt, well, I think this is funny. Let's do it. And they would do it. And
That's the way to do it, I
That,
think.
that is the way to do it, because the kids are just they're gonna watch it and they're gonna like it. If it's funny, they're gonna like it. Even if they don't get the gag, they're gonna know somehow. They're gonna know. I love the cartoons. There were a lot of gags, and there's one in particular, and it's from a Warner Brothers cartoon. I think it's Drip Along Daffy, and it's basically Daffy. It's supposed to be like a Western town, and so Daffy is out there. I guess he's battling with some other character, and Porky Pig is there, and Daffy's supposed to be like the sheriff. So he goes, I'm going to clean up this one horse town, and so he ends up losing at the end. And the last shot of him is he's pushing like it's like a can on wheels, and he's basically cleaning up. He's cleaning up around, and Porky Pig's line, "Good thing it is a one horse town."
See, that's great.
Yeah,
that's a great joke.
It's a great joke. Yeah. So, a lot of fun stuff, and there's a lot of things that I think, especially with the Fleischer cartoons, that are very risque. And they eventually clamped down on the Fleischers, but those early Fleischer cartoons, I would say the early 30s Betty Boops, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. And if you just look for it, you'll find it. It's in there. So it's pretty neat. So do you allude to that? Do you talk about that stuff here too? Like when you do the show? When you watch a cartoon, do you say look out for this or look out for that? Do you ever do that or?
Yeah, we try to tease what's in it. So the goal is to get people interested in the cartoon. So we always give a little bit of history, but also we always try to find a reason why you should watch this now.
Right.
Either it's really funny, or it's beautifully animated, or it's it's the first appearance of Superman. You should watch that.
Right.
So yeah, we always try to give a little bit of a tease or into the content of it.
What do your friends and family think of DADTOONS so far? Have they watched any? Are they just groaning, or are they they actually giving high fives? They're going, yes, you've done good.
Puzzled by it.
Yeah, what was that?
I think they're a little puzzled by it.
Yeah.
I think everybody likes it. Everybody says nice things, but I think everybody's like, why this?
Yeah.
Why ancient cartoons?
Right.
Is that what you've decided to do?
Well, I think you answered that question, which was, because they deserve to be seen. They're great cartoons, and
absolutely,
yeah. And by presenting them the way you're presenting them, I think. Do you have a sign off at the end? Like when you do these things, do you? Are you start off you're drinking at the beginning and at the end, or you're all plastered by the end of it, and it's like, yeah, it's great.
The beginning always starts with a cold open of us doing something dad-like. So we're trimming the hedges, we're taking out the garbage,
right?
We're we're walking the dog, we're doing stuff dads do,
right?
And somewhere in the middle, we usually yell at an off-screen kid. So there's an off-screen child that we discipline usually.
Right.
It was like, oh, daddy's doing his thing. Leave.
Right.
Go read your books. Daddy's doing his thing.
Sure. Right. Wow.
And we always try to chastise the parents a little bit. So it's always you really should be showing your kids this already.
Right. And you're a bad parent because you don't.
Exactly.
Gee.
Exactly. Come on. Good parents would show their kids these cartoons from the 30s, but I guess you need me to do it for you. That's kind of the attitude that we take.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, like I said, I really love it. And what do you see being 5 years from now doing this? Have you thought about it?
Yeah. So right now, my thought is let's do this for a year. Let's do it for a full calendar year and see what happens. Ideally, yeah, it catches, and we do have a lot of fun doing it. So that's a thing too. But I'd like to have a nice backlog of all the good cartoons. And I'd like to be where somebody's like, oh, I want to see this old cartoon. Let me see if it's on DADTOONS. Like, that's kind of how I want it to be eventually. Like, it's a big list of old cartoons that you should watch. And that's how I want it to be seen. And
Okay, pretty cool. Are you going to have like a, I mean, I know it's early, but are you eventually going to have like maybe a blog or a website where it actually has like a summary of each cartoon and then maybe a link from there directly to YouTube, something like that?
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. So I did buy the domain for dadtoons.com.
Oh,
right
cool.
now it redirects to our YouTube channel.
Oh, very good.
But we also have plans for a show where we review like more modern cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking. So me and my co-host Matt,
Right.
our favorite animated movie ever is a Goofy movie.
Okay, it's a good movie.
So
Yeah.
So we have plans to like do a review of that.
Right.
So the idea being like we maybe review more modern cartoons, hook people
Mhm.
that are interested in learning about those more modern cartoons, and then they like us, and then they watch all the classics. It's kind of our plan eventually. So that's coming.
Right.
Maybe in the next couple of months. We haven't filmed any of those yet, but that is the plan.
It's coming up. It's coming up.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think it's a lot of fun. I'm going to be tuning in, and
Awesome.
and everybody out there should take a gander over to YouTube and check out DADTOONS, because there's a lot of hidden gems there, and I think the way you're presenting them is a lot of fun. So anyway,
thanks so much. That's awesome.
Well,
That's
thank you for coming on here, and maybe we'll check back with you, when things progress, but
That'd be great.
yeah, so very cool. Anyway, great
Thanks
talking
for
with you.
having me.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. I love your podcast. I'm on it, so that's awesome.
Yeah, you're on it. You're stuck. All right, very good. Okay, thank you so much.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Hey, thank you, Braden, for being on the show today. And if you didn't catch that, it is DADTOONS, DADTOONS, and it's available on YouTube. You can subscribe to it. And I think he does a show a week, so please check that out. Well, we started this podcast a little bit over 2 years ago, and 3 months into the podcast, or maybe about the 10th or 12th episode, FeedSpot, which basically monitors all these podcasts and the popularity and stuff, put us in the top 25. And we've kind of stayed in that position for the last couple of years now. But we've been slowly creeping up. And so that's a very good thing. And we've had a lot more listeners this past month than ever. So I want to thank everybody for telling a friend or subscribing to the podcast or just coming back religiously to listen to these episodes. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. It's so appreciated. So please keep listening. And please keep telling your friends. Anyway, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do so. Go to any service that carries us. Click on the subscribe button. Just not Google Podcasts, because they're kaput. Anyway, I want everybody to have a great day. I want you to have an excellent week. And thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.